Okay, well, this is OPTI and ECE 527. It's a course in holography and diffractive optics. Glad you all signed up, and I think you'll find that this is going to be a very interesting and rewarding class. It's my main subject area. I've been working on this for more years than I hate to admit, since even before I was a graduate student. But I've always ceased to be amazed by some of the things that you can do in this particular area. Now, not only is it, I think, the subject interesting, holography, an interesting subject, but it also kind of pulls together lots of different aspects of optics. So polarization, interference, wavefront analysis, all of these features are incorporated into holography. And if you really know how to use them, you can really make some interesting systems and have a number of really, I think, very good applications. So so at any rate, the class is going to be sort of orchestrated through D2L. So you should all have been perhaps notified through email about the fact that you're in the class and that there'll be this website assigned to it. So the website, I'll be loading up all of my prepared notes as well as the notes that I actually go through in class. So if you happen to be out for a particular lecture or whatnot, and I may have to be out maybe 1 or 2 days during the semester, so I will pre-record the lecture in that case, and I'll let you know prior to that. But at any rate, you'll see my handwritten notes as well as my word process notes, and so between the two, you should be able to keep current. Grades, I will post the grades up on D2L so you can access them and see what you've gotten on different assignments. So let's just go through some of the logistics for the class. I have a joint appointment in ECE and optical sciences, and my office and lab are over in ECE. So as far as office hours, I thought it might be most convenient if I just stuck around for a while after class, so that you can get a hold of me. And then if you have other questions, feel free to email me, and I'll get back to you within a few hours, hopefully, to answer your questions. My email is actually Kostik@email. It's changed from, I didn't notice that ECE there. It'll still get to me if you send it ece.arizona, but email is the current one. And my office is in 556E over in the ECE building near Mountain and Speedway. And my lab is in room 249. And so again, we'll be on D2L. We have a TA for the class, Thiago Jota. He's sitting in the back, or Jota, sitting in the back of the class there. And we're fortunate to have Thiago. He was in my class a couple years ago and did well, so we wanted to come back and do some more. So anyway, so I asked him maybe to have office hours on Monday and Wednesday, and it looks, so he'll be available from 3:30 to 4:30, 8th floor Minell, which is this building. You know, like what area of the 8th floor? There's out in the area where there's all those nice tables and chairs to stare out over the scenery. Okay. All right. And I noticed his time sort of straddles the time for class. So if you have a class from 3 to 4, you can catch him from 4 to 4:30 and vice versa. So I think that'll provide some flexibility. So we'll have, for the class, we'll have a couple of things going on. The main thing, I think, really are the homeworks, to kind of work through the homeworks as much as possible on your own. There'll be about 6 homework assignments for you to work on. That'll be worth about 20% of your grade. And then for the, so there's some online students and in-class students. So the online students will not be able to do the labs, and they're not going to be held responsible for that. So there's kind of a separate breakdown. I'll get to that in a minute for the two groups. But we will have a couple of demonstration labs, and actually I think it's more like 4 or 5 labs. We added a new one last year, which I think is pretty interesting. And these are mainly like, really kind of a demonstration lab, so you can go in there and actually do a little bit of holography and kind of get an idea for what's involved. They're not meant to be very time-consuming or take up too much of your time, basically. But I did want to have some illustration of some of the experimental aspects, which are pretty important in holography, so I think it would be very useful for you. There'll be one midterm in the class somewhere around the middle of October, the 2nd to 3rd week of October. I'll firm up the date further. If you're going to be out of town, I forget when the OSA meeting is this year, but but at any rate, if you're out of town for some reason and can't make that particular date, or if you have 3 other midterms that day, let me know, and I could help and work around it with you to reschedule that for you, make it more convenient. And also, so there's only one midterm, but I would also like again, kind of a short review paper. There's a lot of things going on in holography, and I'm not going to be able to cover all the applications I would like. And I think as graduate students too, it's very important that you're able to kind of look at the literature, pull out a subject, and kind of glean out the main parts of it. And so what I've been doing is have the last lecture or two, probably with this number of students, we'll have two class periods, and there'll be about you'll have a 10-minute period. You'll present a short summary of a paper and maybe write up like a 2-page summary of that paper and present your work to me and to the other students. And I think this will be a very useful exercise. That'll take place like the last week of class. So again, not meant to be too demanding, but just something to expose you to more of what's happening in the area of holography. And then there'll be a final exam that'll be worth about 35% of your grade. So for the online or distant learning students, so there's 2 issues here. One is the labs. So there'll be no lab requirements for the online students. I do have some of the labs documented like in a PowerPoint, and so after we do the lab, I'll post the PowerPoint sort of summary of what was in the lab, so online students can kind of still get some of the flavor for the labs, and also they'll only be required to turn in a short paper rather than give a presentation. Yeah.
Is it possible to record the labs with a cell phone camera or something?
Yeah. There's a lot of, so we could do something like that. I'll try to do some sort of recording. There's a few essential parts of the lab. Maybe what we'll do is maybe I'll have my grad students, 2 of my grad students kind of volunteer to help with the lab. So maybe what we'll do is get together and pre-do the lab, here's how you do this and that, and then post that afterwards so you can see that. The labs, so we'll talk about the labs a bit later, but the way we've done the labs in the past is we'd probably be able to just like split the class up into 2 groups and find a convenient time when you all can meet. If we need to go to 3 groups, we can go to 3 groups as well. And then we'll just schedule it like in the morning or an afternoon of one day during the week. So you just come in and do it. It should only last maybe about an hour and a half at the most to to run through the labs. So I'll have more on that later. We'll probably start the labs about mid-September, and I'll have more on that and post the lab experiments descriptions up on the D2L site for you. As far as textbooks, I'm not really requiring any textbook. I'm actually really trying to finish writing my book. I've been working on this for a number of years. It's coming together. I have maybe 3 more chapters to write. I just finished a big chapter this summer on materials. Also, I did get a whole chapter just on holography that was published in a new Wiley book. I'll see if I can make that available. It's about a 45-page summary of pretty much everything we'll be covering in the class at a pretty condensed level. But you can get a pretty good overview of things from that. So I think it's okay for me to do that. I think I could post like 1 chapter of a book without getting into trouble. I'll have to check, and since I wrote that chapter, I figure I should have some ability to do that. There are a couple of good books as well. If you don't have Joe Goodman's book, he was actually my advisor when I was a grad student back at Stanford 30 years ago. Jeez. His book on Introduction to Fourier Optics is a book that you really need to have. So if you wanted to buy a book, I would buy that book. There's some other good books. This book by Kufal, Saltis, and Sincerbox, I actually wrote a chapter in that book too. We had a large program on holographic data storage back in the late 1990s, and this book is one of the outcomes from that activity. There are a lot of good chapters in that book on different aspects. If you're interested in data storage, that book is very interesting and probably worth your while to have a look at. And then very recently, much to my chagrin, since I was trying to write my own book and I thought the field was pretty open, Vincent Toll came out with a book a couple years ago, which is a very good book on holography as well. So you might check that book out. I have a couple copies if you wanted to have a look at it and see what that is like and whether you wanted to invest in that book as well. But I will, again, I have many of my chapters written, and we'll be posting them and we'll be lecturing. The book is kind of an outgrowth of my teaching of this class for a number of years, and so again, you're not really required to buy anything. So anyway, so that's kind of the logistics. Are there any questions about things? Yeah.
Just as a clarification, the lab portion is going to be over in the ECE building?
Right. That's where my lab is. I have actually 3 labs over there and a dark room, so we can do kind of material processing as well. Although I brought some, since the first day of class, I got some show and tell. Holography is very cool in that way. So this is one of my all-time favorite holograms. It's a portrait. I didn't take this. A good friend of mine, Richard Rawlson, did this. He had a business up in Utah. Can you see that? Kind of. It's very cool, I think. So you're wondering why she's staring in a laser, But they do it at a very short pulse rate, and so yeah, you could even see it on the TV pretty well. That's cool. So one thing I wanted to show in this particular hologram is that one of the features of holography, of course, is that you can get this 3-dimensionality, and unlike a photograph where you just get this kind of flat image, a 2D image, a flat image really, here you get full perspective. And again, the reason why you get that is because we're recording a wavefront, not just the intensity profile. When you record the intensity profile, of course, as you know, you throw away all of the phase information that was recorded. But the process of holography is the process of retaining that phase by adding, in electrical engineering, it's adding a carrier wave. And a lot of ideas came about not only both from engineering aspect, like from communications and so forth, as well as from the physics of wavefront and diffraction theory. So again, so if you look at this, I'll pass it around. Hopefully, I think I get better lighting here because I had these spotlights above me. The fluorescent light's not going to work too well. But what I'd like you to notice is that you could tilt this and look at it in a way so you'll see, you know, her nose will block one of her eyes. If you look at it with a perspective from one direction, you look at it from another direction, and you can see that eye. So you're really getting this full parallax of imagery in a holographic image that's being reconstructed. And so that's a very powerful, you know, kind of feature which really stands out and makes it very unique. So we will address some of these things. There's a variety of applications. Those of you who took my solar class last spring kind of remember this, which I brought around for the first day of show and tell there. By the way, I teach 514A. If any of you want to take a class in PV, I teach that in the spring semester. It's cross-listed with OPSI, so you can do that. But here, this is a holographic concentrator called a holographic planar concentrator. Most solar concentrating systems have a large collecting optic that focuses light down onto small cells. The cells in those systems are very efficient, but they're very expensive. So you can't spread them out over a whole panel like you do with silicon. So, but the idea here, this idea came up when silicon was still pretty expensive prior to 2008. And so the idea here was to eliminate half of the area that's normally taken up with more expensive solar cells, in this case silicon, replace it with holographic strips which actually collect the light in these areas where you can see these multicolored strips, which are the holograms, and direct that light over to the photovoltaic cell. And even though the price of silicon has come down pretty dramatically, there's still a cost advantage in doing this because the price of silicon for PV cells is somewhere on the order of $150 to $200 per square meter, whereas the holograms that could be made here, actually there's a company here in town, Prism Solar Technologies, that manufacture these holograms in strips on rolls and can do it for $2 to $3 a square meter. So one of the aspects of PV systems is cost, the dollar per watt that you can get. And so the things that dramatically drive down the cost are very important. So this is a very different application that you might see. And so I'll pass those around. I also brought been making a couple of test holograms. You can see a little flash of green and red, maybe, something like that. I brought this because this is the material that we'll use in our lab. It's a polymer that's made by Bayer Corporation, same Bayer that for aspirin. They actually have a polymer division, and they have an office in Austin, Texas. And fortunately, I know Dave Jarlberg pretty well, and he sends me some film when I need it for class and stuff like that. And it's a very nice material. I should say that, so I've been working in holography for 40 years. I did a undergrad, or not an undergrad, but a master's at University of Rochester around 75 to 77, and I did some holography then. I actually did some holography prior to that as well. And a lot of materials back then, the only material really available was silver halide and dichromated gelatin. So silver halide is photographic film, high-resolution photographic film. So that requires a lot of wet processing in order to to develop the material and form the hologram. The polymer is these are some of the breakthrough materials today. These polymers are laminated, they're made on a microcarbonate backing, and basically you just laminate. You can laminate them down on glass, or you can get the polymer itself and spin coat it down onto a glass substrate, but there's no wet processing required, which is really cool. It really speeds up things, makes things much more repeatable. The way you develop this is basically just to expose it to light to kind of fix the monomer, the remaining monomer that's inside the material, and that then solidifies where the grating is formed, the holographic grating is formed. So we'll talk more about that, but I'd like to just pass that around. You can see it's fairly efficient, and they're very easy to make. I've made lots of different kinds of these holograms here are actually both the portrait and the PV concentrator holograms are made in dichromated gelatin. That material's also been around forever, basically, but it's a very versatile material. We still use it today in my lab for a number of the solar applications. The reason it's so useful is you can modify the properties of the grating. Basically, you can do almost anything you need to do with it. And this has really served us well for applications, mainly in applications where you need very broadband features. And so I'll talk a little bit about that actually later today and show you some of that. So there's a whole range of materials from very simple to use to very complicated and very difficult to use. You have to control like the humidity, the temperature of the environment, as well as the temperatures of the solutions that you use for the processing of the material. So when you're over in my lab too, you can kind of poke around a little bit. Well, maybe with some escort, and see some of the stuff that we have there, how to make some of these materials. We have another material too. I'll talk a little bit about that application, which has really been an extremely interesting project for us. In that, we want extremely selective holograms, making basically they're wavefront sensing holograms. And so we use those in a medical imaging instrument to do sectioning of a tissue sample to find early stage cancer in our case in the ovary. So there's a lot of different applications. My background is mainly in making holograms like this, hard elements that you use in optical systems, but there's a tremendous amount of work going on in other areas too. And so in those areas, you use cameras for your recording material. And so that's the area of digital holography. And so that's a very interesting field. We're actually going to do an experiment on digital holography. That'll be our last experiment that we'll do for the course. And you'll see how that's done. Because there's a lot of applications in that. I was kind of looking at might as well show that one now, but oh yeah. So I was looking through the web at some applications and came across there's a number of really large companies now, such as Apple and Microsoft and Oculus, which I believe was just purchased by Facebook. But they all are looking at holography for kind of next system display type systems used in a lot of their products. Like this is supposedly a next generation iPad. I don't even know exactly how this thing works. Certainly, I mean, you have to have a screen. You can't just project a interference pattern in air. You need some scattering, right? So I don't know if they're going to have this thing that rolls up off the ceiling or what. But anyway, there are a number of different displays. There's a lot of vision displays. I know the Google Glass didn't really make it, I guess, but that wasn't holographic. Maybe that was the reason why it didn't make it. But there's a lot of this, kind of virtual reality holographic constructs. There may not be strictly holographic in a true sense. They may be more stereographic than holographic. But at any rate, they draw heavily on the principles of holography. And so hopefully in this class you get a good grounding for understanding the operation of lots of those different systems. And I know they are hiring. I served on Brian Wheelwright's defense a couple of weeks ago, and he went to Oculus. And one of my former students who came back as a postdoc working for Mark Neifeld, one of my colleagues over in ECE, he just got sucked up and went to Apple to work on, holographic displays and things. So, there's a future in holography for you if you want to kind of pursue it. So, anyway, let me pass some of these things around. You could have a look at. Try not to break them. I think they're pretty robust, but here, I'll put this one here and that one there, and you could just pass that guy around too. Okay, so let me kind of quickly go through the syllabus a little bit to give you an idea of what's going to be happening. So I've broken the class down. So there's a lot of detail here. I made another list because that list was too long. So it's broken down into a couple of different areas, and I tried to put this together just before class, so I may want to add something here as we go on. But we'll have sort of an introductory phase for the class, a couple of lectures, kind of talking about terminology primarily, and things that you'll need to you need to know. I'll be talking about them, and you'll be wondering, what am I talking about? So I wanted to have a introductory session to kind of explain what some of these terms are, so that you're kind of not lost from the beginning, and give some fundamental ideas, some basic ideas and tools that you'll actually use throughout the class, such as the grading equation, the Bragg circle, k-vectors, and things like this, which are very useful in design analysis and useful in figuring out what's happening in a system. After that, we'll talk about a little bit about Fourier analysis of gratings. Fourier analysis is quite useful in holography. It's a diffraction process, and Fourier analysis, again, is very useful in sort of describing that diffraction process. So again, it's worth a bit of a run through on that. And there are, related to the Fourier analysis, there is also a number of geometries which can be tied pretty closely to these Fourier principles. Okay, like for instance, in holographic data storage, usually a Fourier transform hologram is recorded because it tends to allow you to compress a lot of the data into a very small area and still be able to recover that data. So the name of the game in data storage is to get the most number of bits into the smallest amount of space. And so again, so some of these Fourier principles are very useful for that. So it's probably worth going through that to some measure. I know a lot of you have taken, is Masoud teaching the Fourier optics these days, or? Oh, okay. Well, anyway, I know a number of you have taken the Fourier optics class, so I'm just going to kind of go through some of the essential features of the Fourier analysis that you'll need for the class and to get you through that. The next big section that we'll cover is image analysis and of holograms. And so there's two sort of basic things that you need to do when you're designing holograms. One is you'd like to know where the light goes, right? Forming an image, or if you're making a grading for some type of spectrometer system or filtering system, you want to know where the light is going. And so that part is described by the image analysis. And so for that, there is ray tracing that you can do. You can do exact ray tracing. And then you can do surface grading vector matching, which will also be useful. And then there's also paraxial imaging relationships and aberration analysis that you can evaluate the holographic image from, much like you do in a refractive or reflective type optical system. So what I'd like to do is, oh, you brought the toll book. That's good. So what I'll be spending a fair amount of time on is looking at this image analysis area that's very important in analyzing holograms. So we'll do that. And then we'll look at a number of different fabrication considerations. So there are, so of course, when you're recording an interference pattern, you need to have some degree of coherence in the optical system. And so, if you're making just a general hologram, you kind of like to have that coherence length very large. If you have a larger coherence length, that means that you can be pretty sloppy in your setup and still get by making a hologram. However, a number of people have actually used the fact that if you have, say, a limited degree of coherence, then you only get an interference pattern when you're not so sloppy, and you make the path lengths very close to being equal within that coherence length range. If you do that, you can actually do things like sectioning. So, yeah.
Isn't the main thing with the coherence length is between speckle and then resolution?
Well, the point I was, of course, speckle is important, and you don't want to have a lot of speckle in your that you're recording, for instance, unless you're interested in recording the speckle for doing kind of a speckle interferometry kind of recording. But what I was after is if you make so kind of a basic holography setup.